In 1875, before the mansion had a name, before carriages lined its gates and society's elite whispered about its splendor, it breathed for the first time in the dark. William felt it before he ever saw it. The ground beneath his bare feet hummed softly, as if something deep below the soil was waking up and stretching its limbs. William was hired the way shadows are invited in, quietly and without record. In 1875, the mansion was still more rumor than structure, spoken of in taverns as a house that would swallow the hillside and spit out history. Officially, William was only meant to carry tools and haul scrap wood from one end of the property to the other, a boy small enough to slip through crowded scaffolding and unnoticed enough to be forgotten when the foreman counted heads. Unofficially, he learned the house faster than anyone else ever would. He listened while pretending not to, memorizing the way the men argued over measurements, the way architects whispered about last-minute changes that never appeared on paper. At night, when the others drank or slept, William traced the layout in his mind, noticing how the structure contradicted itself, how hallways bent too sharply and staircases descended where there should have been solid ground. The blueprints he glimpsed were incomplete, though the men insisted they were final. Lines stopped abruptly, rooms ended in blank space, and entire wings were discussed that had no ink to prove they existed. William discovered those missing places by accident. Sent to retrieve a dropped hammer, he followed a corridor that should have led back outside, only to find himself standing before a narrow doorway framed in stone darker than the rest of the house. It was not marked on any plan he had seen. Inside, the air was colder, heavier, as if it had been waiting far longer than the mansion itself. When he returned, the doorway was gone, replaced by a smooth wall, and no one believed him when he spoke of it. From then on, William began to notice patterns. Some rooms were only accessible after sunset. Certain walls echoed when struck, hollow in a way stone should never be. Workers were sent to places that no longer existed by morning, blamed for their own confusion when they returned pale and shaking. William started mapping the mansion in secret, scratching marks into scrap wood, memorizing turns and distances, learning which corridors shifted and which remained fixed. The house seemed to respond to his attention, revealing passages only when he was alone, guiding him downward through service stairs that spiraled beneath the visible foundation. He realized the truth slowly, not as a revelation, but as a weight settling into his chest. The mansion was being built with intention beyond beauty or wealth. It was designed as a maze with a memory, a structure that learned the shape of those inside it and adjusted accordingly. William, the boy no one bothered to watch, became the only one who truly understood the house, because it showed him what it was long before it was finished, and long before anyone else dared to believe that walls could listen and corridors could choose who they allowed to pass and who they would quietly keep forever waiting in the dark, where the blueprints had never intended anything to exist at all. The changes began subtly. Began subtly. The way rot spreads through wood long before it is visible on the surface. William first noticed it on his 4th week at the mansion, when a staircase he used every night ended one step too soon, pitching him forward into darkness that had not been there before. The lantern shattered, and for a moment he lay still, listening to the house breathe around him, a slow expansion and contraction that did not belong to timber or stone. When other workers came running, the staircase was whole again, the missing step restored as if it had never vanished, and the men accused William of clumsiness rather than questioning what they had all felt beneath their boots. After that, the mansion grew bolder. Corridors shortened or lengthened depending on who walked them. Doors locked without hinges, pressing shut with a weight that felt deliberate. Rooms William cleaned at dusk were unfamiliar by midnight, their windows facing directions that contradicted the land outside. The house rearranged itself most freely after dark, when the workers were exhausted and less likely to argue with their own senses. William learned to count his steps, to leave small marks only he would notice. But even those were erased by morning, as though the walls resented being measured. The voices began shortly after. At first they sounded like drafts slipping through cracks, then like murmured conversations behind walls that had no rooms attached to them. William heard names spoken softly, names he later realized belonged to men who no longer returned to work. Some voices pleaded, others warned, and a few laughed in a way that suggested relief rather than fear. The sounds always came from places the blueprints denied existed, from behind sealed doors and beneath floors too solid to hollow. When William pressed his ear to the stone, the whispers grew clearer, as if the house approved of his listening. One night, a carpenter named Elias was sent into a narrow wing to repair a warped beam. William watched him enter, lantern swinging, muttering curses. Minutes passed, then hours. When the foreman finally sent others to retrieve him, the wing ended abruptly in a blank wall. No door, no passage, no sign Elias had ever been there at all. By morning, the men spoke of him in the past tense, accepting his absence with a resignation that felt rehearsed. William, however, heard Elias that night, his voice thin and distant, trapped somewhere inside the structure, calling William's name though he had never told it to anyone. That was when William understood the truth he had been circling since his first night on the grounds. The mansion was not merely changing, it was choosing. It kept those who wandered too far, folding them into its shifting corridors, using their voices to lure or warn the next soul who crossed its threshold after sundown, ensuring the house would never be empty and never be finished in any way that allowed its occupants to leave once it decided they belonged to it. The first disappearance was treated like an inconvenience, an error in scheduling rather than a loss of a human being. His name was Thomas Reed, a stone setter with hands permanently dusted white, a man who laughed loudly to prove he was unafraid of the night work. He was assigned to a lower corridor just after dusk, sent to inspect a crack that had appeared where no crack should have been. William watched him descend a short flight of steps that curved gently out of sight, lantern bobbing like a hesitant star. The corridor was old stone, finished too early compared to the rest of the house, its walls darker, smoother, as though polished by touch rather than tools. Thomas never came back up. At first, no one worried. Men went missing for hours all the time, wandering the mansion's confusing sprawl until they found their way again. But when the night dragged on and the lantern oil burned low across the grounds, the foreman grew uneasy. 2 workers were sent down after him. They returned confused, swearing the steps ended in solid wall after only a few feet. They insisted Thomas must have turned around before reaching the bottom, though William knew better. He had seen the way the corridor had opened for Thomas, welcoming him with a depth that was now gone. By morning, Thomas's name was struck from the ledger without ceremony. His tools were redistributed. His absence was explained as drunkenness, desertion, anything that required no investigation. William stood nearby while the men spoke, hearing a faint tapping beneath the floorboards, a slow and careful sound, as if someone were testing the strength of the wood from below. No one else reacted. It was as if the house had already taught them how not to listen. That night, the voices changed. They were no longer scattered murmurs, but a single presence that followed William as he worked. Thomas's voice drifted from behind walls and under staircases, calm at first, asking simple questions about the time, the weather, whether the others were still there. As the hours passed, the voice grew strained, then quiet, then hollow, repeating the same words again and again, describing rooms that shifted while he spoke, doors that retreated as he approached them. William realized the house was allowing him to hear this not by accident, but as instruction. The fear that spread among the workers after Thomas vanished did not lead them away from the mansion. Instead, it bound them closer to it. They stayed together, avoided certain areas, followed routines the house seemed to reward with stability. William saw the pattern forming, understood that the mansion fed on absence as much as labor, that each disappearance made the structure more complete in some invisible way. Thomas had not simply been lost. He had been taken as proof that the house could claim anyone it wished, and that once it did, the world outside would quickly learn how to forget them, while the mansion never did. The woods below the mansion had always been avoided, spoken of as unsuitable ground, where roots twisted too tightly and the soil refused to settle. William was the only one who noticed how the house leaned toward that stretch of trees, how certain corridors pointed downward, as if listening for something beneath the earth. He found the entrance by following a draft that smelled of wet stone and iron, a narrow service stair concealed behind a wall that only appeared after midnight. Each step descended farther than the mansion's foundation should have allowed, the air growing colder and older with every turn, until the sounds of construction above were replaced by a silence that felt deliberate rather than empty. The chamber beneath the woods was not carved by tools. Its walls were uneven, shaped as though the earth itself had been persuaded to make room. At its center stood remnants of something older than the mansion, a ring of stones darkened by soot and stains that no amount of time could wash away. Symbols had been etched into the rock, worn smooth by hands that had returned again and again, repeating rituals that predated the plans, the architects, even the land deeds that claimed ownership of the hill. William understood then that the mansion had not been built on the land by chance. The land had been chosen because it already knew how to hold suffering without releasing it. The voices were louder here, no longer trapped behind walls, but drifting freely through the chamber. They spoke of bargains made in desperation, of wealth demanded at any cost, of foundations laid not with mortar alone, but with lives pressed into silence. The mansion above was only the visible shape of an agreement made long before William was born, a structure designed to gather what the chamber required and funnel it downward, room by room, person by person. Every disappearing worker strengthened the bond. Every forgotten name feeding whatever waited patiently beneath the stone ring. William realized the house was not complete because it was still hungry. Its shifting corridors were not flaws but mechanisms, guiding chosen individuals toward places where escape became impossible. The woods, the chamber, the mansion itself were parts of a single design, one that needed witnesses as much as it needed victims. William's presence, his ability to see what others ignored, had not gone unnoticed. The whispers addressed him directly now, explaining without words that he had been allowed to find this place because someone would eventually have to remember how it all began. As he climbed back toward the surface, the mansion seemed heavier, its walls pressing inward with renewed purpose. The corridors no longer shifted to confuse him, but opened cleanly, efficiently, as though pleased. William understood the terrible symmetry of it all. The house was built to display grandeur above ground and conceal truth below, to dazzle the world while quietly feeding on those denied the power to refuse. The secret beneath the foundation was not merely why the land was chosen, but why the mansion could never be satisfied. Why it would always require more bodies, more voices, more forgotten lives to remain standing exactly as it was meant to be as the mansion neared completion. The nights grew quieter in a way that frightened William more than the whispers ever had. The house no longer shifted randomly or tested its workers with sudden dead ends. Its corridors settled into fixed paths, its doors obediently opening and closing as expected, as though it had learned enough and no longer needed to experiment. The foreman praised the progress, boasting that the most difficult phase was behind them, unaware that the mansion had simply finished choosing. William felt it watching him constantly now, its attention heavy and intimate, following him through every hall, as if memorizing him the way it had memorized the others who never returned. The voices no longer pleaded. They spoke with acceptance, describing what it was like to become part of the walls, how fear faded once resistance ended. They told William that escape was still possible, but only because the house allowed the idea to exist. He tested this by edging toward the outer grounds one night, heart hammering as he crossed familiar corridors. The doors opened for him without hesitation. The air felt lighter with every step, the scent of pine and open earth creeping back into his lungs. He realized then that the mansion could let him go, but doing so would cost it something it valued. William understood the final choice with a clarity that left him hollow. If he fled, the house would continue exactly as it always had, claiming new workers, new caretakers, new lives drawn in by curiosity and need. No one else would ever know the truth buried beneath the foundation, and the mansion would stand for generations, praised for its beauty, while quietly feeding on the forgotten. If he stayed, if he sealed the final secret by becoming its keeper, the house would stop hunting so recklessly. It would have what it wanted most, someone who remembered, someone who belonged by understanding rather than force. The night before the final stone was set, William returned to the chamber beneath the woods. The voices fell silent as he stepped into the ring of darkened stone, the air tightening as if the earth itself were holding its breath. He felt the house above him settle, waiting. In that moment, William realized the cruel precision of it all. The mansion had been built not just to contain suffering, but to ensure that someone always carried its story, bound to it as securely as mortar-bound stone. When the sun rose the next morning, the mansion stood complete, flawless in its grandeur. The workers noticed only that William was gone, his absence absorbed as easily as the others had been. Yet from that day on, no one else vanished within its walls. Visitors spoke of an unsettling calm, of a sense that the house was full even when empty. At night, when the lamps dimmed and the corridors cooled, a single presence moved quietly through the halls, remembering every passage, every voice, every secret the house would never again need to steal, because it had finally claimed someone who chose to stay